All right. Hello, everybody, and welcome to today's Dynamics 365 Tech Talk. Today's session is part 2 of the series about Dynamics data in Synapse Link for Dataverse and transitioning from export to data lake to Synapse Link. My name is Rich Black, and I'll be your moderator today. We are broadcasting this session through Teams live events. Now, before I introduce our presenters, including Jila Yadav, JJ, a Principal Solution Architect at Microsoft, and Milinda Vitharana, a Principal Product Manager at Microsoft, let's take a look at our series agenda. Hopefully you were able to join us for our first session in which we introduced the topic of transitioning from export to Azure Data Lake to Synapse Link for Dataverse, and in which we covered an overview of this process. Today, we're in session number 2, and we're going to discuss architecture patterns and virtual data warehousing. So we're going to introduce various different architectural patterns, and we're going to get started using Synapse Link. Please be sure to join us for sessions 3 and 4, in which we're going to explore specific architectural patterns in more detail. In session 3 on November 16th, we'll be discussing advanced cloud data warehousing, and we'll also cover incremental data ingestion in that session. And finally, on November 21st in session number 4, we'll explore lakehouse architecture in detail and discuss reading and transforming data using Spark. So today, I'm going to hand it over to Milinda, who is going to give us a brief recap of yesterday's content.
Sounds good. Thank you, Rich. And thank you, everyone, for joining. So this is a quick recap of what we discussed yesterday. If you could not attend in person, hope this 2-3 minute overview will help you there. So let's talk about what is Synapse Link and what are we talking about? What is the transition here? Really quickly, essentially it is a reduction in total cost of ownership. This is one of the benefits that you're going to get. And this is a detailed session, so we will not go deeply into the business benefits or the expected efforts and timelines, but you'll get an idea of it throughout with demos and so on. So what is this transition? Many of you are using export to data lake, perhaps even previous versions of exports. Essentially, you are exporting data from your Dynamics 365 into your own Azure Data Lake. And then maybe you're using Synapse or other tools to query that data, and tools like Power BI or other tools to visualize that data. So export to data lake was built into Dynamics 365 Finance and Operations, FNO. Synapse Link for Dataverse was built into the Power Platform. Now, what we are doing in this, what we've done the past 12, 18 months is we've combined these two services together. It's an evolution and unification across all Dynamics products. I mean, if you've been in this Tech Talk series, you know that we made a concerted effort to combine these two products into one family of products, and certainly this is the next step. So essentially, there's one experience to work with all your data and export it to a data lake and work with Synapse and Power BI. So that is what we are going to talk about. Now, if you're also familiar with this product called Microsoft Fabric, essentially, you can think of Microsoft Fabric as a evolution of Synapse and Power BI into a single SaaS product. So, Microsoft Fabric makes it super easy to get AI-driven insights using things like copilots that are built into Fabric. So it makes it a whole lot easier. It enables a new generation of users to work those products, because with copilots, it becomes so much easier for power users, data analysts, to do the kind of things that dedicated data engineers, specialists did. So one of the things that we talked about is, how do you transition? What are the steps in this transition? The first thing, I think the most important thing, is to upgrade to Synapse Link. So you might be using Data Export Service, you might be using BYOD, you might be using Export to Data Lake. Essentially, by upgrading to Synapse Link, the one sort of experience for working with your data, you are simplifying your data integration, also reducing a whole lot of TCO, total cost of ownership. You will see this in the demos, and you will see us discuss this again and again. But the key thing that we want to focus on today is that your data shapes remain the same. So you do not have to redevelop your reports. And hopefully we will discuss one pattern today. JJ will give a very detailed demo and kind of show you how you can work with the same report by simply doing this upgrade. Now, that's the first step. Thereafter, there are a lot of opportunities available for you to, for an example, enable low-code insights, enable a new generation of users using Microsoft Fabric. So this transition, you should think about upgrading to Synapse Link, step one, and then your existing in-production reports, dashboards, all those integration pipelines, those things will continue to work, which will also set you up to benefit from Fabric, as and when you decide to go there. So I hope that agenda is clear. I hope our intent is clear to you. And with that, I will hand you over to JJ.
Thanks, Rich. Rich will cover these few slides and then...
Rich, yes.
Oh, yeah, actually. So for this next session, right, before we get into a fantastic demo from JJ, we're going to introduce some of the common analytics architecture patterns that many of our customers are using, when they're working with Export to Azure Data Lake. This is a very widely used feature, and hence our focus here on providing this demo-driven overview of the transition strategy that you can use to take advantage of Synapse Link as well as Microsoft Fabric. So let's take a look at several of the patterns that we're going to be exploring today and in the upcoming sessions. So today we're going to focus on the first of the architecture patterns that is pictured here, virtual data warehousing. And we're going to be reading data from Data Lake. We're going to be looking at this in comparison to using Export to Azure Data Lake. And we'll be working mainly with serverless Synapse pools. In upcoming sessions, in session 3, we're going to explore the use of dedicated Synapse pools and cloud data warehousing in more detail. So we're going to be ingesting data from the lake into a cloud data warehouse. We'll be working with some transformations there. And we're also going to cover some advanced integration and focus on the incremental ingestion of data. And then finally, in the 4th session, we're going to look at Lakehouse architecture, and we're going to take a deep dive into the use of Spark notebooks for transforming data. So let's go ahead and hand it over to JJ, who's going to set us up for a fantastic demo regarding virtual data warehousing.
Thanks, Rich and Milinda. So I think before we go on the demo, what we are going to show is few slides about and explaining about the virtual data warehouse architecture patterns. And so in these sections, we are going to talk about like how you can upgrade your existing virtual data warehouse from Export to Data Lake to Synapse. So if you're using Export to Data Lake, so this is showing the current patterns, like if you're using Export to Data Lake today, so this is showing the current pattern. So as Milinda mentioned, there were 2 pipelines, Synapse Link and Export to Data Lake. So if you are using Export to Data Lake pipeline, you are basically exporting data to Data Lake in CSV. Then you are basically using tools like CDM util to create the tables, D65 tables as external tables or views on the Synapse serverless. You are also bringing in many scenarios external data to Synapse Data Lake and then creating views or external tables on top of that. And then you are basically creating the virtual data warehouse, as a view on this layer of Synapse serverless. Finally, you might be doing a Power BI, push of this data set, final data set which you created to Power BI, and that's where your report is. And majority of the effort, what you have done in this architecture is bringing your data, creating these virtual data warehouses, logic, the data models, and all that. And in today's demonstrations, what we are going to cover is like how you can keep those as is without having to change that. So the same architecture, what we are going to use here is now the Synapse Link, and from FNO we'll have FNO table selected, and the data will go to the data lake. It will get converted to Parquet, Delta Parquet format because we will be using the Synapse Spark to do the Delta conversion. And this is out of the box setup. I'll demonstrate that. And then, so your D65 data is now on the Delta format. You can continue to keep this structure which you have with the external data, and your final data model as views will remain same. And then you'll continue to use the Power BI import mode in there. So the only change is, you're switching the Export to Data Lake to Synapse Link. You're basically configuring that, bringing that Synapse Spark pool to do the Delta conversion, and then everything remains same. So step by step, how you do that, and I'll demonstrate all these things. But the key thing here is you may have these views created. Synapse Serverless provide ability to extract these through SQL Server data tools is supported on the Synapse Serverless. You can extract those serverless objects which you have created, your external view, the views which are external, or also the views for the data model. Then you will basically set up the Synapse Link for finance and operations app, configure Azure Workspace in Synapse Spark Pool. On this database side, the idea here we are going to present is like you can create a new database in the Azure Synapse Serverless, and we'll have some steps here where you can create the views on this new database, and then you can deploy additional objects which you kind of have extracted from your previous database into this, and your downstream applications, like be it Power BI or any other applications, would need just the connection change. And then you can validate into solutions and go with that. Start transitioning in production. So there is one consideration here, though. There is some audit columns and things like that which we are changing, but there are scripts which can make this audit column even compatible with the export to data lake. So your effort of changing anything is reduced. So let me start the demonstration. Yesterday we kind of demoed about how to set up Synapse Link, so I'll not go too much into details. If you have not, then the steps to set up Synapse Link is very easy. In the Maker portal, you basically can click the new link and then select the Synapse and Spark Pool. That's the steps I have already done, and I have added the tables here. Finance and operations table and Dataverse tables, and they're already in my data lake, and have the data conversions happen. All the tables which are needed are already in here. I'll switch into the SQL Server Management Studio, and I'll start from the beginning, setup of my export to data lake. So I have export to data lake set up in the same environment with the same data. So I can do this in parallel. If you have export to data lake set up in this sandbox environment, you can technically set up this in Synapse Link in sandbox environment as well. So what you can see here, I have a database created on the Synapse Serverless, and I have executed the CDM util. It has created the open row set views on my Synapse Serverless database. That's majority of you probably is doing. What I have here is I have created some views, dimensional data model on top of these views. So I have a dimensional data model called cells, which has customer dimension, employee, legal entity, product dimensions, and all that things, right? So this is a typical, it could be more complex, compared to what I'm sharing here. In your case, you may be merging the data from external sources and all that, but that's predominantly every majority of the customers have this kind of a virtual data warehouse. So the data is still in the lake, but you're creating dimensional data model with the help of these views and procedures, and this is basically get refreshed to Power BI data models to ultimately serve the report. So what I have done is one of the things is extracted these views. Let me extracted these views and put that in a SQL script. So let me open that as well. So I have extracted all these views, and created, put that in a single SQL script. As you can see here, it's all the scripts is in there. It has the complex logic of the transformations and things like that, right? All the nice things which you do in your data models to make it business user friendly. It is all done in these models. Now, when you set up the Synapse Link, it automatically create a new database in Synapse. So when you come to the Synapse, connect to Synapse serverless, which you have linked, it's basically created this database in the Synapse with the name of your environment, Dataverse _ finance CDS, and this is a container where the data is, an environment URL. It creates external table. As you can see here, these external tables are created on top of the Parquet files or Delta files. And you can see that, majority of the business related columns like cost group, name, and all those kind of things are appearing same, with the same name as it was with the export to data lake, right? So there is not much change in the schema. There is some change you may notice into the, the sync created date, and some of these extra fields are added from the audit perspective, audit column perspective. But majority of the business related column, which your reports are based on, is basically the same, right? So you can also create views on the same database. So I have also created views on the same database, but in this scenarios, there's one restrictions. This is a replicated database. So this database, which exists here in the Synapse serverless, also exists in the Spark pool. So when Synapse Link create a link integrate with the Synapse, it basically create a lake database, and lake database get replicated to the Synapse SQL pool. So the advantage of this approach is the same lake database can be used with the Spark, and same lake database can be used with the SQL. However, when it's a replicated database, there is one restriction. You can't create a new objects in the DBO schema, but you can always create an existing, you can always bring a new schema. In this case, I created the sales schema and able to create the same views, which I had before in this database, right? However, I'm going to demonstrate another thing here. I can make it clean and create a new database and get all the artifacts, created as a view as I have in my export to data lake database, so that I can have this same thing happening in my new database. And this is a Synapse SQL pool database. So I have few set of scripts. Let me go step by step and show like how this is working. One other things. I think I want to also show on top of the data which I have in my export to data lake, I also have a Power BI report. Like once I created that data model, I have this Power BI report, which has those dimension tables and fact tables, and all the relation built in. And there is a reports and dashboards built onto this data. The business is using and very happy about, right? We don't want to disturb any change, incur any changes in the report or ETL processes, during this upgrade. So that's the kind of a purpose of the demonstration here. So this report is right now pointing to the export to data lake database. So now if I go back here, so the first script I have is basically I'm creating a new database. So I have already created few new, just exercising, if other things will work or not. And I'm trying to attempt a live demo here to do end-to-end transition of this reports to a new database, which is based on the Delta format and data generated from the Synapse Link. So I'm creating this new database. So this is the script is basically creating a new database. And then I'm going to change this new database and run some scripts to create a master key, because I'm going to need this master key. So I'm going to change the database and then create the master key. So that completed, that's step 0. I have my database created. So you can see this new database is empty. I just created it. Now I have some SQL scripts, which is basically manage identity and all those kind of things to able to read the data from the data lake. So let me, looks like my connection was lost, but let me reconnect it here in this script and go to this new database and create these objects. So I'm running some scripts. It's basically creating some stored procedures. As you can see here, it created some stored procedures which are going to be used, to create the metadata and all that information. Now, this is the third script, which I have, which is basically going to create the same shape of the data which earlier existed in the export to data lake. I can even add those audit columns, which were there in the Synapse export to data lake back into this to provide much more backward compatibility. So what I have done here is just the URL where my Synapse Link is exporting data. I have selected that, hey, this is not incremental CSV. We'll talk about that in the next sessions, but this is a Delta Lake data. And I have this, I want to add these audit columns back from export to data lake. And that's it. Those are the kind of configuration in this scripts. These scripts, by the way, are going to be available into the GitHub. So you can have these scripts, use in your solution. So here I'm going back to the database 3 and running this script. This script is basically going through the Delta Lake folders and, getting the metadata and creating all these tables. Voila. So in 8 seconds, I got my 39 views created, and these are the views just on top of the tables which I have added into the Synapse Link. So same thing, what system already did. This now does some backward compatibility things, right? It added those extra columns like file name, data lake, modified date time, LSN. Many times when you're using the lakehouse architectures, the virtual data warehousing, you don't care about these fields. But in case, like if you care, you can add these columns because these are just the audit column. Last data lake modified date time is just saying that when the data lake was updated, and we have those columns, so we have basically be able to map it to here as well, right? So that's what this script did. If you have added more tables, you can just run this script again, and then it will show up. Any schema changes, you run this script again, latest schema is refreshed, right? So that's the fundamentally. Now I want to come back to my the scripts which I have for my data warehouse solution. So virtual data warehouse, I had this scripts. Now I want to create these scripts, execute these scripts on top of my newly created database. I'm executing this scripts. It's just in 0 seconds, these views are created. I can go here, refresh these views. I can see all my, the views got created here as is. I can go back and now query the same data set here, because this is newly created database, first time I'm querying it, it might take some time to kind of load this in the and create stats. When the Synapse serverless works on Delta and Parquet files, the first run is usually the cold run, but after that it's much faster because Parquet in Delta Lake format has much more richer metadata. And that metadata is used to create stats and all those things. The subsequent run on the Synapse serverless can be much more faster. So here I'm able to get the data return, which I was getting before, clean data with proper name and everything in the Synapse serverless. Now the shape of my dimensional data model is exactly same, the same logic, same things, same tables, joins, and everything. I was able to just get this, created in the last 15 minutes, right? Now, last part. Now, now I can go back and change my report, the connection string on this, and it should be able to work on that. So I am going to attempt it live in here to see. So I have this report which is connected to export to data lake database. As you can see here, I have parameterize the database names. It's connected. It was previously connected to this. I was testing. I connected to this. Now I created this new database recently. So let me do change to database number 3, and it's basically just apply changes. It's going to now connect to new database 3, start loading the data, and refresh the report. Now I can publish these changes to the report, and that's about it. I have the same report working, which was working on the CSV data before with export to data lake, is now being switched to the data which got exported from the Synapse Link. I was able to port all the queries, all the objects which were there in my own data model, and then able to put that in the new database. And in Power BI reports, I just needed to change the connection string, the database name, and now it's loading all the data from this new database, and the report is going to be refreshed and rendered. It's same data artifacts. You will also probably notice that if you have a larger data set, it will probably load faster because the refresh to Power BI can be faster because now you are on the Delta Lake format, not the CSV format. And it can be cheaper too because you are Synapse serverless. You are reading the less data. We have covered that a lot in the yesterday sessions, how you can see that we are getting the 6 time, in majority of the cases, we are getting 5 to 6 time data compressions between CSV and Delta Lake format. So I have around 2.9 million rows in my line fact tables. Here is another things I can do. Because the data in the Delta Lake format is partitioned by year, I can actually create my fact tables to just eliminate, last 2 years of data. So if I have some reports which need, a good partitioning so that this load faster and have less data, because mostly I'm worried about the orders reports in the last 1 year, I can technically do that partitioning, use that partitioning scheme and update my, the fact tables to just load the data whenever Power BI report refresh, just last few years of data instead of full data, right? And that is less cost to the Synapse serverless, less cost to Power BI, and better performing report into the Power BI. So as you saw, like while I was talking about all these things, all the data is already loaded and it's pretty much ready to, complete the report and render here. So majority of the data is loaded. It's just thinking about the relationship and all that. And then in a few seconds, the report will refresh, and you'll notice that there's no change in the report. There is no error in the report. Okay. So this is the kind of key themes. And I also have some of these reports in case like there is any error, but I've tested this couple of times. It's usually take a few seconds after the data is loaded. I also have this reports, as you can see, this is running on the same report, running on these things, and I can actually show the data model refresh. So this report is based on the Delta Lake format. If I go to the refresh history, I have scheduled this to refresh. It has been refreshing very good. Let me see if completed. Okay, usually these kind of things happen in the demos. So it didn't complete the last part, but like as you can see that like the data is loaded. We can give a few seconds while it's loading, but we can go back to the presentations and cover the rest of the topic, and we'll come back to the report and show you, when it's finished.
Ajay, thank you for that excellent demo. I think one of the topics...
The report did finish loading. So I just wanted to show that, so there is no confusion that this was a smoke in the mirror kind of thing. So the report did loaded, and it has this thing, the same report displayed on this new database.
Fantastic. That is great. So I think it's, I think what we've demonstrated is if you have export to data lake with this tool that we will soon integrate into the product, certainly many of you wanted to have access to it in the GitHub. We certainly will let you have that. We will also incorporate that into the product. So what you essentially saw is how easy it is to upgrade from export to data lake to Synapse Link. Now, there are a lot of benefits that you get. We talked about this earlier at a high level. Think of this as almost like the data shape doesn't change. You can achieve this upgrade and it'll reduce your cost of ownership. How so? So I think the idea here is to understand what you're spending money on. And some of these things are obvious, some of these things are not. So for an example, one of the things that you will notice is in export to data lake, the setup and configuration is a little bit more involved. So you may need to work with Azure resources, you may have some skills, you need some skills, you probably need an administrator, whereas Synapse Link for Dataverse, the configuration is fairly simple. Maybe that is a significant cost for you, maybe it's not. But the other aspect that we need to consider is the operating costs. So in case of data integration, with export to data lake, you are exporting data into CSV format in a storage account. Now, storage costs, CSV is a little bit verbose. So, your storage account may have a lot more data, but storage doesn't cost that much money. What you may need to do, however, is the CSV data is not queryable directly. So essentially, what we've seen a lot of customers do is they use something like Synapse so that you can query that data using CSV. Now, sometimes if you have a lot of data, querying CSV files over Synapse may not be optimum. So what we've also seen is some customers create pipelines, ingest that data into a SQL database or a SQL data warehouse. So ingesting, we've built a lot of tools to help you out, but at the same time, building a pipeline, maintaining it, ingesting into a SQL database, that is also a cost. Synapse Link, on the other hand, essentially uses the Delta Parquet format natively. So you will have much smaller files because they're compressed, and we'll go into a little bit of detail and show you details there. But the idea is you will have to spend some compute to convert to Delta Parquet format. However, the storage is much more compressed, and as a result, your reporting costs are going to be way less. So what we mean when we say reducing cost of ownership is because of the Delta Parquet format and some of the improvements that we've done, some of the simplifications that we've done, your overall cost of running this export process is going to come down. So JJ, I know you talked a lot, you must be tired, but if you want to take a crack and maybe show some actual comparison of costs, I know we did a lot of detail in the first session that we conducted yesterday. You guys should watch the video, but JJ, maybe you can briefly touch on this.
Sure. Yeah, I think. So as Milinda mentioned, like the cost of the data storage, in the Delta is very, is quite drastically down compared to the CSV because it's a columnar format and it's a compressed format. As an example, what you see here on the slide, a customer's database was 615 gigabytes of CSV when they exported. And when this was from export to data lake, and when you export the same data, we would say, it would be around, if we compare 6x compression, it would be 98 gigabytes. We took some example, we did demonstrate some example yesterday, where in Ventrans, we give a live example where, CSV data was 1.3 gigabytes. When it converted it to Delta, it's basically 360 megabytes. It's basically 6x compression, right? If you apply that math, 615 gigabytes would become a 98 gigabytes of data in the Delta. Why does it matter? I mean, the storage is very cheap in the Synapse, right? In the data lake. So it doesn't matter like if 615 gigabytes and 98 gigabytes. It's not material storage cost. However, the cost is material when you're querying this data. So if you're reading this CSV data, what happens is, the amount of data processed is how the Synapse serverless cost model is. If you're using the Synapse serverless, in this example, the customer has 615 gigabytes of data in the CSV, but their monthly data read from the Synapse queries, as you can see here in the note, was 2,126 terabyte, and the cost of Synapse serverless is roughly around $5 per terabyte. So this mathematics basically take you to a monthly cost of $10,000. And we share the query how you can calculate your monthly cost in the Synapse serverless. It's very easy. It's a very simple query of historical data process, and you can do that. Now, if you apply that same math of 6-time compression, by default, you get, your cost would reduce to $2,000. You may be paying for the Synapse Spark, conversion in this process, but the operating cost of the owners, the querying is going to be reduced. And that's the key thing. And, 6-type compressions will differ from tables to tables, data type to data types, but largely, you will see more than even this compression, more than 6-time compressions in some of the tables. So that's the kind of a key messaging here that, the delta, and the cost of the delta is not just saved on the compression. There's also the way the delta query the data, the way we are doing partitioning with the delta lake. You can save further cost on top of that. So that's a kind of a key messaging we want to put again here. And I think I'll take maybe a few minutes because a lot of people, I saw the interest was on the scripts, and I can probably share a little more about the scripts, what the script is doing. And the script, I shared the link of the scripts where they are already available in the GitHub. I posted this morning, and I can go back and a little bit explain on the script what it's doing. And the key part of the script is this one. EDL to Synapse, so this is the database setup scripts, which is creating some stored procedures to do this thing. So what it's doing is like there's a bunch of stored procedure in this. First stored procedure is basically taking some parameter and creating the credentials. Credentials are like when you create, and if you're familiar with the Synapse CDM util is like was doing exactly same thing, creating external table or views by reading the metadata from the CDM file, right? Which were dropped in the export data lake. So it's kind of a similar thing. We are creating external data sources and connections, and then reading the CDM metadata from model.json file. We are also doing some NM translation, and some of these things, as Milinda pointed out, is going to be addressed as part of the product. So you don't need these scripts probably need this going forward. But ultimately, what this script is doing is taking the CDM metadata and doing some of those conversions and adding those extra columns, translations to NM and things like that. Like as example, someone was asking like data lake modified date time, how we can add that. We have a sync modified on columns in the Delta Lake, which is same as data lake conceptually, which is same as data lake modified date time. So just add that columns as as an extra column addition to what all is there. That's it, right? And so that's basically what the script is doing, is adding those extra columns, doing some of these kind of translations, and create these views, in a backward compatible mode. If you don't want backward compatibility, you can still just go with the standard. So it's not mandatory to go. It's just to help you reduce the thinking that what all you have to change in the scripts in order to accommodate the and upgrade. So you want to go backward compatible, you can flip those parameters and say that, hey, add those columns. If I'm in any of my scripts is using that, then it will handle that. So that's essentially what the script is doing. I just wanted to kind of give a deep overview, a little bit deeper overview of the script, so that you're not you're clear on it, and you can read these comments and process what it's doing. And if there is any gaps in this, you can or change it or suggest through Yammer and GitHub. We'll add those. Okay, so I think that's all. There are a few more slides, right, Milinda? You want to go back to those?
Yes, I think we covered the cost at a high level, JJ. Now, I think, again, we are double-clicking on the cost. So this is a deep dive of the cost or the benefits. And essentially, I think what we've described is the fact that we are switching from CSV to Parquet format, results in faster queries, smaller files, no update conflicts. So, also it's going to make it much, much easier for you to start using Microsoft Fabric at a later point in time, because the native data format in Microsoft Fabric is the Delta Parquet format, right? So, so essentially, if you have built integration pipelines that takes that data from data lake, CSV, ingest that into a data warehouse, that process is going to get a whole lot easier. And we have a future session where we're going to go through that incremental feeds, right? JJ, anything more to add on the benefits?
No, I think this was pretty much it. And this slide basically talk about different changes, where the effort is, and as you can see, on the cost side, that's kind of a key messaging here, right? And next topic, we are going to cover the incremental data integration. So if you're using data Synapse dedicated pool, or Azure SQLs or on-prem SQL Server, even, then how you can easily switch those models, those integrations to Synapse Link. And we'll show the value, we'll see the value and cost reductions in there as well.
Excellent. So that brings us to homework. We talked about the upgrade. We talked about a lot of the, tooling that's available for you. We talked about some of the benefits. So now we're going to talk about homework. Clearly, there's some learning that you may need, learning about the upgrade, the improvements. So we had a overview session yesterday. I think that gives a little bit more insights into the cost reductions, the different steps involved, and so on. And of course, this session goes a little deeper into painting the same shape, and we have a few more sessions coming up. But I think the key thing is, I think you should give it a try. It's pretty easy to try. You can try that with a tier 1 environment. And, now when you do try it, you will understand how easy, how simple it is. So it'll help you figure out a plan. And of course, reviewing patterns and transition guidance. Visit this link. Of course, for more details, you can join the community. There's already almost 3,000 customers and partners like you in the community. So I would suggest you to join if you have deep questions. And of course, the next is planning the transition. Do you want to talk about the transition process, JJ?
So yes, as you saw, like the transitions should be smooth. Like if you're using the virtual data warehousing today, try these things in your environments. And I think as a dev environments, like there is a lot of questions on CHE. Yes, Synapse Link works on CHE. One catch though, your CHE has to be integrated with a Power Platform, and you can only link a Power Platform to CHE when you create a new CHE. If you have existing CHE cloud-hosted environments, you cannot link a Power Platform environment. So you may need to create a new link Power Platform CHE environment. That option is there when you try to create the CHE environments. Also, another interesting thing, like why CHE? There is a cloud online environment now. It's in public preview. There are trial environment now with finance and operations. So I would highly encourage to try those. Set up those cloud environments, which are just like your tier 2 environment. You can set up Visual Studio, copy your code, deploy your things, everything without having to incur cost on the Azure side. It's all part of your subscriptions and licenses and storage, which is part of your Dynamics ecosystem. So go and create those dev environments and give it a spin. Any of those dev environments, Synapse Link is going to be default there because dev environments are fully integrated by default. There's no need to set up this Power Platform link or anything. It's all pre-configured, right? So use those options to start transitioning. And then if you're, using Export to Data Lake, plan about those steps and start evaluating. And if you're going live soon, then adopt Synapse Link from start because, transition is easy and there is a value add to it. And why we are pushing on transition is because of the value add, because of the cost concerns, cost elements and other things, which is coming to Synapse Link. And plus also, like as Milinda pointed out, it's compatible with the Fabric. Like the Delta Lake format is the native format of the Microsoft Fabric. So it's going to add more value to you, without having to incur, much cost to you from the transition perspective. Yeah. So I think that's a key thing, realized benefit for transitions. That's probably I already talked about. It's on the Delta format, it's very close to Fabric. You can actually, the feature is there to even create shortcut on the Delta Lake files from the Synapse Link. I mean, this is out of the box feature. We'll probably cover that in the, the last sessions. How do we integrate with the Fabric, along with the Lakehouse architectures? So we'll cover that. But if you're trying to transition today, Synapse Link is GA and, Synapse is GA. Everything is GA in that stack. And this is the least effort transition. So it's easier to transitions, but it's future-proof. It will work as is when you switch to Fabric.
Thanks, JD. Go ahead, Rich. After this, maybe we should do a shameless plug for our upcoming sessions.
Yes. Let's look at some of the core theme of the questions and try to answer those questions while we are in the sessions.
Yeah, we have a couple of minutes left to address maybe a handful of questions. We can get to 2 or 3 of them here. There are questions about the cost considerations. I think we've explored many of those in some detail. There's questions about the types of environments that are supported. I think, JJ, you just covered that and encouraged folks to be aware of the new online environments that can be explored as well.
There's a question on also like some questions on dedicated pool. Can Delta format be accessible using Polybase with dedicated pool? We'll actually show, in the sessions next time, we'll show even using the Polybase kind of techniques, how you can even do this, read Delta data directly from on-prem SQL Server 2022. So not just Synapse dedicated pool, but anything which supports Delta. Dedicated pool doesn't support natively the Delta format, it supports Parquet, but there are some workaround on that as well. So we'll share more details in the upcoming sessions about how to integrate with SQL, how to integrate with the Synapse dedicated pool and all those.
JJ, there's also a handful of questions about how to proceed in parallel here, or setting up. Is it possible to set up multiple Synapse links to the same workspace or to the same environment? How can we consider approaching this when we are already using Export to Data Lake in production?
Absolutely, yeah. And I think the Synapse Link can be installed side by side. They use 2 different technologies. Export to Data Lake is based on different technology, and Synapse Link is different. So you can have this side by side, and that's what we will encourage, to go and set up this side by side, compare that, be comfortable, and so that you can easily, and you can realize the value, right, after when you side by side compare. So it can be installed side by side. The profile which you saw in the Synapse Link, multiple profiles can be created. We'll show demo tomorrow, next sessions about how to integrate with the SQL using the incremental CSV files. There are a lot of questions. Is the Parquet Delta mandatory? No, it's not. There's incremental CSV option as well. We'll talk about that, like how you can use that without having to do the Spark and Delta conversion. If you're not using the serverless and using Azure SQL integrations, then that may be the route, right? So we'll share that details as well. And you can have these options. It's not a choice. You can have multiple of these options. You can have the same table doing the Spark conversions. You can have the same table created a new profile and have that incremental data as well. Question, interesting one. I want to take a crack on that, Rich. So SQL create serverless views in NewDB is only needed in case we need additional audit column that previously created by CDM. Right now, the SQL script is needed also to fill some of the gaps, known gaps, like the NM translations, and I'm forgetting about the other, but like there are a few gaps, known gaps, which we have, kind of documented and discussed and shared in the decks, is also addressing those parts, but those are going to be filled. We also plan to include some of these kind of things, as Milinda shared, as part of the product. So you don't have to run any separate scripts, possibly in the near future, to transition. And as those gaps filled in, you don't have to, you can go back to the original database created, and you don't have to maintain this as separate scripts to do any of those things. There's another question on the BYOD to Synapse Link. Yes, that's also, coming. We'll have some additional scripts. There is some product directions on that as well, like how we'll support, add some additional. The other thing is Synapse Link. We didn't talk much about today, but like Synapse Link also materialize entities. Not all entities, but many of the entities can be materialized using the Synapse Link. So you get it one step closer. But we are also going to provide maybe some tooling to bridge the rest of the entities, which you can't do today, right? So we'll share some of those details as well, how you can easily transition from BYOD to Synapse Link. If you're already transitions from BYOD to export to data lake, and you have already views created on the Synapse serverless database, you can pretty much do the same thing what I demonstrated today to have those views recreated on top of this new database. So for those who has transitioned from BYOD to Synapse export to data lake and created entities as a view on the serverless, can still utilize this model of recreating those BYOD views on this on top of Delta format. And many of the customers who did that were sometimes challenging, was like the read-write contention problem. That is gone now with Delta, right? So Delta support ACID properties, which means like when the data is changing, the readers won't be interrupted, right? So that's a key thing. Your Power BI refresh, if you were timing out or failing before, that won't fail because it's provide data consistency.
I think there's a series of questions. I'm not sure if we will have time to answer, but they're in the general theme of how do I work with my data in Microsoft Fabric? Also, can I copy this data into OneLake? Do I need to reconvert to Delta Parquet format? I think the short answer is we have session number 4, where we will probably touch a little bit on Fabric. But the good news is this Delta Parquet conversion is one time. You do not need to convert again to ingest into OneLake, or you don't need to ingest into OneLake. You can just work with your data in Fabric directly. So that's the best news. Of course, that's one of the reasons why we are saying, hey, this upgrade, think about Delta Parquet conversion as your native format, and we will help you do that very easily. So it sets you up to a great spot to benefit from Fabric.
With that said, we'll try to address the remaining questions that are here, but that does conclude the time we have available for the presentation. And I want to extend a heartfelt thank you to all of our attendees, as well as our presenters, JJ and Milinda. And thank you for attending our Tech Talk today. We hope you have a great rest of the day ahead.